Welcome to It Takes Two. I am Charles.
I'm Clarissa.
Talking shop on relationships, mental health, and...
why couples seem to fight over seemingly trivial things.
Why do you always slam the door whenever you leave?
Why do you always leave the lights on when you leave the room? It makes no sense.
Okay, but for real, what are your socks doing on the counter?
What? Those are your socks.
Okay, all right, but no, for real, we're gonna dive into why we decide to fight over seemingly small things. More specifically, we'll cover the question, what is process over content, how it impacts our relationships, and what we can do to become better communicators and better arguers.
We will also have a fun date idea and connection question that you and your partner can do to take your relationship to the next level. So make sure you stay tuned till the end.
Yes, love it. But before we dive in, let's start with our 1-2 stat fact of the week. Dr. Tyler J. Vanderweel, a director and researcher at Harvard University, recently conducted a critical analysis on previous data suggesting the positive effects of marriage on wellness outcomes. His team found of around 12,000 individuals they studied that got married, participants experienced moderate positive impacts on happiness, purpose in life, and hopefulness. Additionally, on reducing depressive symptoms and loneliness. They also found substantial effects, about 30% declines, on reducing smoking, coronary heart disease, and stroke, and on mortality from all causes during the 25-year follow-up. These are notable effects on important outcomes. So, Clarissa Mace, clinical director of Utah Marriage and Family Therapy and fully independently licensed marriage and family therapist, what from your experience do you think contributes to all of these positive benefits in marriage and or a committed relationship?
When I was in a neurology class, I learned that there's parts of your brain that literally regulate your well-being and your hormones that are connected to like sexual reproduction. Specifically, there's this part called the hypothalamus in your brain, and it's responsible for feeding, flight, fight, or fornication.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
So there's lots of areas in your actual biological chemistry and your brain that in relationships you have less stress overall and your body is more regulated.
And that makes sense because we know cortisol, the stress hormone, does have negative impacts on health.
Yeah.
Across the board. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of those health outcomes, but we're also wired, right, to, this is what you're saying with the 4 Fs, is we're biologically driven as mammals to find a mate to reproduce. And our brains kind of sabotage us when we're not in a committed relationship. It adds added stress into our system with the cortisol and whatnot. And then the oxytocin that's released when you are in a committed relationship.
Which also comes from your hypothalamus.
Yeah, and that chemical reduces stress levels, have better health outcomes overall.
Helps keep your body in that homeostasis.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dr. Vanderweel continues, he concludes the study by saying, marriage is a core pathway to human flourishing. It is not the only pathway, but it has been and will continue to be an important one for many people, for the raising of children and for the continuation of society. Efforts should be made to support marriage to help spouses and children, and also all parents and all people to flourish. Doing so is part of what constitutes a flourishing society.
Also, let's just be clear. Marriage could be interchanged with committed relationship because your hypothalamus doesn't really recognize a piece of paper from the court.
Yeah, of course. That makes a secure attachment is what matters here.
Something committed, a bond.
Love that. Okay, well, let's move on to our disclaimer.
This podcast only provides information. It's not a viable replacement for a therapy session. If you need help your local mental health authority. Our hosts are experts on mental health. Many of our guests are too. This podcast does not provide expert advice. It's just entertainment, baby. Names, dates, and places have changed. This podcast should never replace real therapy.
Okay, Clarissa, today we are discussing process over content, which most commonly presents itself in petty arguments. Let's reenact a classic argument you may have experienced or seen.
Honey, why do you leave your dishes in the sink after dinner? It would literally take you 2 seconds to put them in the dishwasher.
Okay, I was about to. I did it yesterday.
No, you did not yesterday. I vividly remember your lasagna spread across the plate and it stunk up the entire kitchen until I had put it away before bed.
Okay, that was different. I was thinking of Monday. Yesterday, my brother called me. I got distracted. I would have done it though.
See, you always have an excuse, and it bothers me that a call with your brother is more important than doing what I need you to.
Oh, come on!
That was a lot.
Okay, yeah. We may or may not have had a few fights like that over the past few years. But Clarissa, let's start with identifying what is process over content, and then we can apply that to the scenario.
So process over content comes from a therapeutic model called the Gestalt Therapy. It's important to note that this was not originally created for relationships. It was published in the 1950s, but then slowly marriage therapists started to see that it applies very much to relationships. Doctors John and Rita Somers Flanagan, in their counseling and psychotherapy book, summarize it really well. What they put is Gestalt therapy focuses on process, what is actually happening, over content, what is being talked about.
Okay, wait. So just say that one more time. Say that again.
Process focuses on what is actually happening.
Okay.
Content is what is being talked about.
Okay.
The emphasis is on what is done, thought, and felt at the present moment rather than what might be, could be, or should have been.
Okay.
Gestalt therapy, or process over content, is also considered a mindfulness or awareness practice because it interrupts the thought patterns circling the apparent issue and focuses and forces you to reflect on what is lying under the surface. The practice is what Gestalt therapy prioritizes in clinical situations.
Okay, so let's get back to our scenario then. What was the process and what was the content in our argument?
So the content was what was being talked about. So the dishes not being done, the call that happened with your brother, those things.
Okay.
Versus the process, if I had to guess, would be based on the underlying issues. So for myself, I was getting after you about the dishes. That's probably because it's important that we're equal partners and that we share the load in our house and that you prioritize doing things for me to help me out. And I'm guessing that for you, it was that you want me to trust that you are all those things.
Yeah.
And that's where your defensiveness was coming from.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I feel like in my scenario, I'm reacting to not feeling like I'm an adult or like I can be trusted with that or that, I'm kind of being disrespected almost or untrusted in that way. Mm-hmm. Clarissa, what would you say are the most common topics couples get lost in the content instead of focusing on the process?
For sure, like housework or
chores,
shared responsibilities. I'd say probably children and parenting. And then if I had to throw another one in, I'd probably say how you spend your time. Like fighting about if somebody's out with their friends or doing something like in their downtime rather than like hanging out with you. You would tend to fight like, oh, your friends are such a bad influence, but rather you're just saying like, why don't you want to hang out with me? I'm lonely or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. And as you are nearing a decade of experience in this field, how is it? I can imagine it's difficult not to be like, hey, listen, couple, I've heard this argument 10,000 times, and I need you to understand that what you're fighting about is not what's the underlying issue. And if they're giving you resistance to that process over content, how frustrating is that for you to be like, I've heard this 100 times from 100 different other couples. Like, let's focus on what's the underlying issue.
I probably tell couples like, I don't know, maybe 10 times a week. Like different people, different times.
Yeah.
That what they're fighting about is not actually what they're fighting about. And it can be frustrating because sometimes I have to kind of entertain the content a little because like they literally won't move on.
Oh, so if for example, the lasagna or the plate being put, like, no, this is a huge issue for me. And you're like, but is it? And they're like, yes.
So yeah, sometimes we'll like end up making a chore list or something because they just like can't move on from that.
Okay.
But if I entertain the content a little bit, then sometimes I can still get into the process stuff and spend more time on that, which is occasionally what happens.
Gotcha. Okay. You know, this reminds me of an example of our first to second year of marriage when I was struggling with, how do I put this? I'll just tell the story and then we can kind of dive into it and dissect it. So right after we graduated, I got extremely sick for about a month.
Yeah.
It was like my body was on full throttle for that last year. And then once I graduated, my body was like, hey, we're done.
I'm pretty sure it happens every time after like a really stressful period of your time. Like if you have a really stressful job and then you have like a month off before your next job or something.
Yes.
You just like, your
Get
body's just
knocked
like,
out. Time to catch
done.
up. Absolutely. And that's what happened. But then even after that month of sickness, I was spending a ton of time gaming. If you remember, I don't know, maybe half my day or more was spent gaming. And I think at the time I rationalized it as, well, I just graduated, I'm taking a break, I'm relaxing before we move into our next phase of life. But I think there was a lot more under the surface that was happening there. And we would fight about the video games. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and from your perspective, what was that like?
It was extremely frustrating.
Yeah.
Like, I just remember being, like, I was concerned about you because your friend had just died right before we graduated. And so it was like, your friend died, we went to a funeral, and then we graduated, and then you're sick, and then sick, and then sick, and then playing games. So I was concerned about you, but I just attacked the video games. I just thought that it was the video games because I'm like, all the things I've learned about them, they're so addictive and like people get hooked on them. So I just went after the video games and I would just tell you all the time how you're playing too much and it was bothering me. And I guess that's the majority of what I remember.
Yeah, and it was a perfect storm because I also have some trauma from when I was a kid and how my parents would shame us and guilt trip us for playing video games. It was kind of funny because they would buy us the video games, but then they would say like, you're playing it too much, or like, why don't you do something with your life? Like you're basically worthless if you're only playing video games. And so that narrative was very triggering to me too. So when I was being attacked for playing video games, I was just trying to take a break, and it's the great paradox. We're going to reference this constantly in this podcast. We will do an episode on it. But basically the idea is the more you resist something, the more resistance you receive. And so I would just want to run back to more video games. I would just want to keep playing more and more to avoid the conflict, to avoid having to deal with my feelings and that. So I would play more games, which would make you more upset. And it was just a terrible, vicious cycle.
Definitely.
So what was it then that changed in our understanding of that problem?
Sorry, I just remembered how I think it was literally in grad school.
It was.
That I remember learning about this and starting to realize like, oh, maybe I'm not actually upset about the video games. And it took me like recognizing I'm vilifying the games. I'm fighting with him about the games. But really what I'm concerned about is that you weren't being like vulnerable with your emotions or talking to me about what was going on with your emotions. And then I felt like you were putting the games before me and that you wanted to play video games more than be around me. So I felt like rejected and hurt by that.
Yeah.
And so I think if I would have went to you initially about how I want you to talk to me about your emotions and I want to like be chosen and spend time together, not necessarily chosen over games or that you have to hang out with me more than games, but just chosen and spending time together. I think you probably would have received that a lot better because you can empathize and validate more with like wanting to connect and the value of being vulnerable versus me just coming at the games versus me just attacking the games. That didn't make sense to you because games are really positive and they like are very enjoyable and it's just what you like to do in your free time. So why does that have to become a fight?
Yeah, for me it was really helpful when we started talking about the underlying causes. And I think there were even times where it was unrelated. Like we were just talking about my emotions post-graduation. And then we made a connection afterwards and being like, hey, wait a second, maybe this is why I feel like I want a game so much. Maybe this is why I'm trying to escape reality a little bit more often than not, is because I haven't confronted these feelings and emotions. So as you mentioned, I experienced cyclical depression, and I was in one of the worst depression seasons of my life at that point. As you mentioned, I had a friend pass away, which was really difficult, really challenging, and that sickness and there's just a lot of things going on. And so
I think also graduating, like you go from like having this purpose and then it's just all of a sudden you're graduated and like, should you have a job? Should you be going to grad school? And like just, we were going to take the summer off either way, but then that still felt like you weren't enough. So it kept triggering the depression.
Exactly. So there, and that's just it. Like gaming was the tippy top of the iceberg, but I had so much process underneath that I needed to address and confront. And once I did, it was awesome. Like
non-issue.
That issue was completely resolved. I also learned how to be more transparent about my gamer shame. Gamer shame's a real thing. My boys and girls, don't worry. Games are a great, wonderful, healthy thing. But confronting my emotions and separating that, and then focusing on you and what your needs were, having quality time with you. And then there was always time enough for both.
Yeah.
And actually, as a quick side note, jokes on us at that time because this podcast is inspired by that incredible co-op video game, It Takes Two.
Our favorite co-op video game.
It's in my top 10 best games ever made.
Same. Maybe number 2.
It's not we're not sponsored by EA's
No.
It Takes Two, but we love it. Wonderful game. Amazing. Anyway, and we spend a lot of time playing games now.
Yeah. Which back then, like before having that conversation, we didn't play games at all together.
No.
Like I didn't really play video games and certainly not really that much together. But it was like once we were able to like clear the air, then I wanted to play games. Like why not try it out?
Shot, yeah.
Yeah. And it was cool because I think once we were able to identify it, it also gave us the tools. Like once we addressed the process, it gave us the tools to create a better balance of what you needed and what I needed. So you were able to talk to me more about your emotions and your depression. And so then I understood you better. So then I wasn't as hard on you. I wasn't as resentful of you for certain things. And then you were also able to recognize that like, hey, if I want to play games, Clarissa's chill with that. I just can't run off and go play games because I'm ashamed and I'm depressed. I just need to like tell her, hey, tonight I'm really excited to play this video game. Like, let's do something beforehand. So then we'd hang out beforehand and I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Instead of just feeling like that rejection of like, wait, where'd he go?
Yeah, it's so interesting you mentioned it was structured. I forgot. Like it really was structured.
At first,
where I'd be like, hey, I'm going to hop on Rainbow Six with my friends at this time. And then afterwards, you and I were going to watch a movie or we're going to have dinner together or something.
Yeah.
And you felt good about that. And then we built trust with that.
Totally.
And then there was an opportunity for you to play Red Dead Redemption 2. You saw me riding the horses and stuff, and you really liked it. And that was kind of your pathway to exploring games. We should do an episode on gaming, like just like
one
healthy
of the
gaming in a relationship.
Fun.
It is a common challenge in couples therapy.
Very common.
Yeah.
I also wanted to talk about how once we address some of the like shame around gaming and like the process that you felt and I felt, it got better. Like you didn't run to video games as much to avoid your issues. You were addressing the process that you were experiencing and your issues. So then it led you to have like a healthy balance with it. And so it didn't appear like you were playing video games all the time.
Yes. And that's the inverse positive effect of the great paradox.
Yes.
Where you accepted me. You said, okay, yeah, you're a gamer, you like playing video games. I accept that part of you. And then I didn't want to spend so much time with that. I want to spend more time with somebody who accepts me.
Yeah.
And vice versa, I'm sure. Like that's just how the beautiful great paradox works. Mm-hmm. Moving forward, how do you coach most couples on process over content? In the therapy room, how do you help two people or more who are struggling with it?
This is, in my mind, maybe other therapists out there can agree. If you do, please comment on this video.
On that note, comment, like, subscribe. Yo, what's your boy? Sorry, anyway, keep going.
There's this really funny bit that Charles does. Yo, it's your boy Charles Mace with another YouTube video. Like, comment, subscribe, it used to be hit that like button.
Don't forget to smash notifications, ring the bell, just like stuff like that. Dude. It's just over the top. And then here I am actually on YouTube.
I know, right?
Asking for subscriptions, likes, and comments. It's so funny.
So what I was trying to tell you was, if you're a therapist and you agree or disagree, please go leave a comment, because I just think that process over content is the bread and butter of therapy, or at least it's the bread and butter of my therapy. Because when couples are fighting in front of me, it can be really easy to like just get sucked into that content and just be like, okay, I'm going to help you guys fix this. I'm going to make this chore list. We're going to make a schedule. Let's do this. Let's get a bank account together. Like I can get sucked into that content. But I'm constantly pulling myself back and watching the process of what's happening. And then what I reflect back to them is not necessarily like, oh, so what I'm hearing is you want to have equal chores. I don't necessarily reflect that back. What I reflect is more, what I'm hearing is you want an equal partner, or you want to feel like you're sharing the load so that you're less overwhelmed. And so I reflect the process back to the partners.
Yeah.
And it helps them understand the process over content so that they can properly validate and repair whatever they're arguing about. And so it's just like a constant thing in my mind when I'm watching couples.
It reminds me of a kind of strange analogy with coding and programming.
Oh,
okay. So with coding and programming, you have to have the code perfect. Every line of code that makes a software or an app function has to be perfect. Otherwise, it's going to crash, or there'll be bugs, or all this other stuff. I feel like process over content is just like screaming at a program for not working. Like, why are you broken? This app won't open. Ah! Like, it's just like, well, that's not going to do anything. Like, you're valid in feeling frustrated that your program isn't working. But you have to go into the back end and you have to find out what the real issue is. And then once you do, you'll realize, hey, the vast majority of this program and software is solid. It's just this one thing that we needed to fix, and now everything's going to run smooth. Yeah.
A lot of times people call it like the core issue. Like, and when you talk about the program, it just makes me think of that core issue is not that something's like broken and you need to fix it. It's like there's something underlying in problems, and we need to find that underlying.
So you're telling me that you aren't really that upset about the lasagna smell coming from the sink?
I mean, it's pretty gross.
It
I
is
hate
pretty gross.
lasagna.
No, it is that you want to feel like an equal partner, that we're equal contributors, that
When
you can
I'm at
ask me to do
work,
something
like
and I'll
that
do it.
you're doing things to help out so that I feel
Yeah.
better when I get home from work. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
yeah,
By the way, we never eat lasagna. I don't know why that was the
chosen
scenario.
food.
I don't know. It just sounded
'Cause
funny.
it's stinky and gross.
Clarissa, where can listeners go to find more information about process over content?
I'd say the best way to start would possibly just be therapy.
Therapy. Oh, just go to couples therapy?
Yeah, just go
Crazy.
to couples
Yeah,
therapy.
okay, there you go.
I actually did want to say that, but then I also thought of the other way you could start would possibly be Googling Gestalt, Gestalt, process over content. So Google Gestalt process over content. I'm guessing you'll probably find some stuff that's really clinically written, but there should be YouTube videos, which we were able to find, books, articles about this. And so you can read about it and learn it on your own and learn tools to use that at home. And then if you want to level it up, go to therapy.
Go to therapy. Therapy's great. I love it. Okay. Clarissa, let's whip up the takeaways. Number 1, why do we fight about seemingly trivial things?
Because they're not trivial to us. We actually feel deep underlying issues about them that we're trying to communicate. It's just that we don't really have the words for it.
And what is process over content?
Process is what is actually happening, what's being done, thought, and felt. And content is what we're talking about.
Then how do we practice process over content?
The best way to practice process over content would be when you are arguing about something, try and zoom out and observe what is happening and what you're both saying, and don't get sucked into the dishes or the socks or whatever it is that you're fighting about.
Talk about that underlying emotion.
Talk about the underlying emotion. So you can do it for yourself first, like when you're complaining about something or bringing up a critique, think underlying, why is this bothering me? What am I trying to express? And then express those things instead of, why aren't you doing this? Or could you do this?
Amazing. Amazing. Well, before we go, we want to gift our listeners a date idea and connection question that they can try out this new knowledge this week.
Yes. So the date is really simple. Watch reality TV.
Wait, what?
You know,
Really? That's
reality
reality
TV
TV
is my favorite thing. It's why do I go to work and watch people fight all day and then come home and watch people fight?
I love that that's your date idea. Go watch reality TV.
Let me finish. Reality TV is not only entertaining, but it's a low stakes way to observe what we talked about today. Watch The Bachelor, Love Island, Desperate Housewives, Love is Blind, whatever flavor of reality TV you like. While you watch, though, whenever there is an argument, pause the show and discuss with your partner what was the content and what potentially is the process. This will help you begin to calibrate your mind's awareness to focusing on what's underlying instead of what's on the surface. Then, afterwards, enjoy your favorite snack or dessert and take turns sharing times when you felt like you focused on content over process. It doesn't even have to be about your relationship. It could be about your family interactions, coworkers, friends. But what we want to do is feel safe identifying times we've done it ourselves without critiquing our partners. The day should be lighthearted, hopefully humorous, and will build a deeper understanding of yourself and your partner.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Do you want to go on a date?
That sounds amazing. Let's do it.
So you want to watch Desperate Housewives?
Yeah, desperately. Salt Lake City especially. That's I definitely want to watch reality TV.
I thought your thing was a little bit more Love Island.
Oh, Too Hot to Handle. Actually, is the reality TV that I like. Oh my gosh. No, but what's funny about the reality TV is it's hyperbolized. So I almost feel like it's easier to create to do this is because it's just over the top and it's like, oh yeah, this is definitely
Yeah, they're
else.
definitely fighting about like this really trivial thing versus, oh, like what they're actually fighting about is, and it's just fun to theorize. Like, oh, what they're actually fighting about is probably this, and they're just saying it in a way that's unproductive.
Yeah, if you want to level up that date, sip actual tea while you're watching the show. All right, now this is Charles.
And Clarissa signing off.
Now just remember, for things to get better,
For me and you, it takes two.
All right. Yeah. Let's get out of here. Go watch some reality TV.